Hey guys, getting into DIY can feel a little intimidating, especially if you're not used to using power tools or tools in general. So I have a list of tools today for those of you who are new to DIY and kind of wondering what tools are the best ones to invest in to begin with. It can be hard to know which tools are the best ones to start with. Tools can be expensive, so purchasing a whole bunch of tools right off the bat might not be in the works for you. So this list is kind of to get you going, get you started on those projects. So one of the very first tools that I suggest for people to get is a impact driver and drill, or just a drill. If you only want to pick one, a drill will get you both the ability to screw things in and to drill holes. You can change out the bit to be a drill, to drill a hole. You can have any kind of screwdriver bit on here. So this is kind of a all-in-one tool. An impact driver is slightly different. It's more for screwing things in, and it gives you a little bit more power and torque to really get those screws in there a little bit easier. So these will often be sold in a set of two, so that's a really nice way to get both of them. Another power tool that's super handy when it comes to building stuff is your brad nailer. This is going to be really helpful if you're doing any sort of trim work. It can help with shelving, building cabinetry. This one is, as you can see, battery powered, which is really nice if you don't want to have a air compressor, drag a hose through your house or wherever you're working on your project. I really love this one just for the simplicity's sake of not having to have any sort of extra elements involved. When it comes to DIY, working on projects, doing house projects, having a circular saw is indispensable. This tool can do so many things. You can chop wood, you can rip wood. The versatility of a circular saw is really, really useful. I recommend it for anybody who's getting into DIY. This one's a little bit bigger, a little beefier, as you can tell. This one is a worm drive. It's a little bit heavier. If you want something a little bit more intro, easier to handle, a circular saw that is battery powered is going to be lighter, and so it's going to be a little bit easier for you to handle. While the circular saw is super versatile, the one thing that it is not able to do is cut any sort of curved lines. So that's where your jigsaw comes in, and a jigsaw is one of those tools that is just really amazing for all those kinds of projects that need a little bit more creativity. If you're cutting any sort of curves, a jigsaw is going to come in really handy. It may seem like it goes without saying, but a hammer is one of those tools that you're just going to use all the time. So getting a nice hammer, any hammer really works. There's different kinds of hammers based on, specific types of work you're doing, if you're doing framing, etc., etc. But just any sort of really standard hammer, you're going to be using that for all sorts of projects. Another tool that goes without saying a little bit is a tape measure. Obviously, you're not going to be able to do much without a tape measure. You just want to get a nice tape measure. I like having a few different sizes. I keep a smaller size just in my house or in my purse, so like a 12-foot or 16-foot, and then having a longer one like a 25-footer for your bigger projects. Another tool that's going to come in really handy is a sander. I have a few different kinds of sanders, and they all kind of work in slightly different ways and are good for slightly different types of projects. The sander that I find myself using the most is this sheet sander. It comes in handy for all sorts of refinishing projects. You can change out, obviously, on any of these sanders, the grit of the sandpaper. So this one is one of my favorites. I really like this one. This one is kind of similar in the way that it moves, but it has this nice tip here in the front so that you can get into more of the corner area. And then you have this kind of sander, which is a little bit more heavy duty, as you can see. So this one would be for like heavy duty refinishing. And there are a few different other kinds of sanders out there, but these are kind of your standard three that I personally have. One of the tools that maybe isn't on everybody's list, but it's definitely on mine, I use this all the time, is my level. So I have a few different levels. This one obviously is my big old long level, but I also have a very small one about this big, and then I also have a 4-foot level. So those are all really nice for different uses. I use the small tiny one for more projects like making sure my pictures are level when I'm hanging them, and then something like this is really nice for making sure that, like, when I'm framing a wall, that it's level, and so things like that. A nice long level like this also functions as a straight edge, so if you're wanting to cut your plywood, you can place this on there and you can mark that line and you'll know it's nice and straight because a level is straight. So I always recommend people getting a level. These longer ones can be a little bit pricier, but a nice 4-foot level is gonna come in handy a lot. Another thing you'll really want to think about when it comes to getting power tools, especially when you're starting out, is some safety gear. So you'll want to protect your eyes, protect your ears. So just go ahead and grab yourself a couple protection. You don't necessarily have to have these big old guys. You can have the little ear plugs, but these are going to be really something you're going to want to get, especially if you're using power tools. And something that you want to keep in mind when you are getting into buying your battery operated power tools is that you want to make sure that you're buying all of the same brand of tools. And the reason for that is that tool companies make their own batteries. So if you buy, say, a DeWalt drill and then you go out and buy a Ryobi saw, those batteries are not going to be interchangeable. So like you can see, I have a DeWalt battery here and I have a Ryobi battery here. Obviously, these are not going to be compatible with your tools. So batteries can be expensive, battery chargers can be expensive. So once you get into a certain tool brand, you're kind of going to want to stay with that because otherwise you're just ending up with a bunch of different tools that have a bunch of different batteries and they're not going to be interchangeable. And so you're just going to have to be buying a bunch of different batteries, a bunch of different battery chargers. So it's just much more simpler if you want to be able to only invest in a few batteries that work with a lot of tools versus having a bunch of batteries because all your tools are different brands. And when it comes to tool brands, does it really matter all that much about the brand? In my opinion, unless you are a professional carpenter, you're putting your tools through the paces every single day for 8-10 hours a day, I honestly, when you are getting into DIY, it does not matter. You can use Ryobi, you can use DeWalt, you can use Makita. Just use the tools that get you moving and making. Some of them might be a little more fine-tuned, some of them might be a little bit more heavy-duty. When I was a photographer, you know, one of the phrases was like, the best camera that you have is the camera that is in your hands. So whether that's an iPhone, whether that's a Canon DSLR, and I think the same thing applies for tools. Most of the tool brands that you're gonna find in a Home Depot, in a Lowe's, those are all gonna be great for you, and you don't necessarily need to worry as much about this brand versus that brand. Just find what you can that's in your budget and just start making. All right, you guys, I hope that that was helpful and I hope that that gets you started on your tool journey, helps you get started doing those DIYs that you've been seeing other people making and you really want to get into it, but you just have been a little bit hesitant about the tools that you don't have and which tools are important to invest in the beginning. That is my list of the tools that I use all the time, constantly using those specific tools. And so I believe that those are the ones that you should invest in to begin with. Once you start doing your projects and maybe you start finding yourself wanting to get into a more specific style of project, there are different tools that you're gonna find will suit those avenues better. So maybe you are doing a bunch of projects where a table saw is gonna be really helpful, or different projects where maybe a router is gonna you're gonna use the heck out of that. So just get started, and then along the way you'll be able to build your tool library and specifically for the projects that you're getting into. There you go. I hope that was helpful. Smash that subscribe button and stick around for more projects, tutorials, room transformations, and more. Thanks, guys.